Recording in progress.
Okay. And what I typically do is I think I'm going to turn the lights out. That's okay. So people can see it better. Go. Good. Good evening, everyone. My name is Brenton. Oh, hold on. Before I do it, I will cut that out, but I need to make you the host. I apologize. The one thing
No worries.
Make the Mr. Duquette the host because he's going to share. You're going to share your screen. And do you want to test that to make sure before I get recording? You'll have to end the recording from your end.
Sure. We can do
Just test the screen and the volume just to be sure of the composition, and then we'll get started after.
Can you see this okay? I'm not sure what side it's looking at.
Okay? I'm not sure what side it's looking at.
I can see you.
Okay, and then if I
I don't see the screen.
Oh, I want it to be this one. Okay, so if I do that, and
There we go.
I do that, and then
that, so you guys see
so
just
you
what's
guys
here with
see just what's here.
Mm-hmm.
see the mouse moving?
We see the screen now.
And
Yeah,
it's full screen?
And it's full screen.
full screen.
Perfect.
Yep.
So you got this, you can see everything
You got
moving.
this, you can see it moving.
Yeah, everything's moving fine.
Oh, I didn't share it with volume.
Oh, there's
I didn't share it with volume.
yeah.
I can
Good.
just
All
do
right.
that next time.
I
So I
can
think
just
we're
do
good to
it.
go.
Good. All right, then we're good. And if anything comes up, we can cut it off from the recording. All right,
Cool.
let's get started. Here we go. Good evening, everyone. My name is Brenton McGee, and thank you so much for coming to this Meet the Musician lecture that's hosted by Friends Home in Kennett Square, Pennsylvania. My name is Brenton McGee, and I'm the Performing Arts Associate here at Friends Home in Kennett. And it's my honor and distinct pleasure to continue to have these professional musicians talk to not only our residents and their families, but also the community and people from around the world, to hear from real professionals in the music field, to experience the music that they do and present, and have our residents really be engaged with these types of people. We started this 2 years ago, and it's been very popular with our residents. We often play it live for the residents to see, and then we have a skilled side and we have an assisted living. And usually the assisted living side hears these lectures live in the evening usually, and tonight is evening. And then we have it recorded that often is played for the skilled side as well. People who it might be too late for them and they want to see. And then we also post it on our YouTube page. When I started having these music lectures, I invited our musical guest tonight to that lecture, and he presented some music that was different caliber music. But tonight, I invited Isaac Duquette back to present a piece of music in particular that I recorded called Forever Sleeping. But I'd like to read Isaac Duquette's bio and then give the floor to him. Isaac Duquette is an up-and-coming freelance composer and horn player, and he lives in Reading, Pennsylvania. He attended Westchester University, where he studied horn performance and music composition. Currently, he is an instrumental studies graduate. Well, sorry, that is not correct. He actually graduated from Temple University, and he was recently married and is going to his second year of marriage. But Isaac is also a hardworking and studious horn player and composer who strives for peak excellence in both himself and his art. And tonight, we will be talking about his piece, Forever Sleeping, that was written for tenor and soprano, piano, and cello. He's also going for his artistic diploma at Montclair State University in French horn. And he's also not only a good composer and still writing really good compositions, but he's also auditioning for world-class symphonies. And some of the symphonies that he's auditioning for is the National Symphony and the San Francisco Symphony, just to name a few. On a personal note, I met Isaac 6 years ago in a composition class. He was an undergraduate student, and I was a graduate student in vocal performance at the time at Westchester. And we were in a composition class, really got along. We talked not only music, but football and many different subjects. And Isaac is a really nice guy. I am a big fan of his career, and he's a really wonderful friend. And I couldn't have been happier that he agreed to do this lecture again for us. So without further ado, here is Mr. Isaac Duquette. The floor is yours. In my hands.
Thank you. Thank you so much for those kind words. It's kind of hard to believe it's already been 6 years and that our friendship is as close as it is, despite you liking the Ravens and me liking the Steelers. But we've managed to overcome some differences.
You're a Steelers fan and I'm a Ravens fan, but you know what? Two different worlds. We mesh. It mesh, and so that's awesome.
Absolutely. Yes.
So the talk I want to give today is beyond just the music, but go into the depths of how we recorded the piece of music and some other aspects about how you record and produce music, specifically classical music. So I will share my screen here. So before I kind of go into what the key points of the lecture are going to be about, I wanted to go a little bit more into what the piece actually is, how it came about, and things like that. So I wrote the piece, I guess it was my senior year of undergrad, so that would have been 2019, 2020 that I was working on it. And I've been writing about some other things, and I was trying to really find what my voice was. And I forget who the teacher was, but they're just like, write something that's true to you. And mental illness is something that I'm very passionate about being an advocate for, something that I and many of my close friends have had struggles with. And so I decided to write a piece that was specific to what my struggles have been. And so I took my actual suicide notes from my youth and I set them to text. So the first movement of it is telling the story of two characters who are unnamed. One is a male voice, one is a female voice. And it is of them on this parallel but unconnected journey. And I envisioned them walking down a street, not necessarily next to each other, but just walking down a street and having similar feelings of just deep unhappiness with life. And at the end of that movement, it transitions into movement 2, where the two characters, still not together, decide to act upon that feeling and take their own life. And in movement 2, it goes from this romanticized version of sadness of just like, I'm tired of being tired, and this beautiful sadness, to really grotesque, strong feelings of depression. And at the end of that movement, the characters finally meet together and bond through this mutual terrible feeling. And then they attempt their own lives. And the third movement is that they have failed, and it's how they're grappling with the guilt that comes from having taken an attempt on your life and being unsuccessful, and all of the shame and the guilt. You feel selfish, all of that. And it tackles how one gets past that. So that is the piece Forever Sleeping. It's in 3 movements for male and female voice, piano, and cello. So with that, the overview of today's talk is going to be about how the music recording industry works specifically, how I recorded and mixed this piece, why I made certain decisions regarding what mics I used, how I mic'd them, and how I kept things separate so I could make editing easier later, and I'll go into that a little bit as well. How one would mix classical music, pop music, and how those differ, and how I combine the two to create the sound I got. I also want to cover mistakes I made in the whole process for miking, mixing, and everything, and how down the line I might go about fixing that in the future and trying this whole process again. So before I get to that, I want to show a snippet of the piece. I'll show you the entire third movement so you can get an idea for how this piece sounds and how it goes. So here's movement 3 with the lyrics. Oh, sorry. There we go.
So we're not hearing music right
Oh, you're
now.
not hearing it?
You're not hearing
We're
it?
not hearing it. No. So
Let
it's
me
just
see
see,
what
just
I
test
can
the
do.
sound. We can cut this part out in the video, but we're not hearing the track. We're watching it, but we can't hear the video, the sound.
Trying to see why it wouldn't.
Trying to see why it wouldn't.
I thought I clicked shift.
I thought I
Let me
clicked
try.
shift. Let's try.
I mean, the other option too, if it doesn't work there, you can also use YouTube too. That's another option. But I don't know how I don't know how your audio thing is working on Zoom. But I know we figured it out because we had this problem 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's see. I'm gonna repeat this. Let me just hit. Start this again.
Start this again here and
slideshow.
I thought I heard something, but see that worked. That might be it.
Can you hear that?
Yeah. Can you hear that?
No, is it playing on your side?
It is playing on my
It
side.
is playing on my side.
Ah, kind of odd.
It might be because I'm sharing.
It might be because I'm sharing. Well,
I better see.
let's see.
It shouldn't be that.
Shouldn't
Let me try it this way.
Let me try it this way.
I know in the recorded version, I can just add your YouTube version of it. I mean, so it's just for the, and this part will be cut out, but.
Well, you guys can see everything here right now,
You guys can
right?
see everything here right now, right?
We see you right now.
Can you? Oh, that's right. You can't see.
That's right. You can't see them.
So can you see?
So can you see it?
Now we can see the screen.
All right.
Compunction.
Try it this way and tell me if you can hear this.
Let me just pull it up here.
Those are the words.
Can you hear this?
No. Huh.
How about now?
Let's see.
I'm not sure if it's because of having multiple monitors up right now.
It could be.
If I do.
We will eventually play it, folks, so just bear with us. I mean, do you want to try the YouTube? I don't want to take away from
do you hear it
the
now?
project itself, but no. We're actually just see it 000. Does that have something to do with it? You're more tech savvy than I am.
That sounds like something's broken. Whoa. Just heard it. Like twice.
The other option too, Isaac, is we could play the piece from our end, which we've done before. Okay, because we can play the piece on our end. All right.
Wait, there's usually. Oh, here, let's do it this way. This should probably fix it.
This should probably fix it.
So if I do that,
Try it there and see what works. From the
do you
current
see the screen that
slide.
has just the lyrics, or are you seeing the one with
lyrics,
notes?
or are you seeing the one with notes?
I see the one with lyrics on it. Sorry.
Oh, I didn't click with sound. Well,
Oh, I didn't click with sound.
these are some rookie mistakes on my
These are some
end.
rookie mistakes on my end.
I'm singing the song because they don't know the song like I know it.
Any sound?
Any sound?
No.
That's really weird. I can hear it on my end. I don't know why.
But I've got it. I can get it up on YouTube because it's on
What?
YouTube. Try it again. Because I can play it for them. And then you can figure that sound thing. You want the whole third movement?
Yeah, let's do the whole third movement and I'll pull up
Yeah, let's do the whole third movement.
So how about this? I'll tell you what. Try to figure that sound issue. And anything you want to play, I can share it from our end. And then on the recording, I can cut and paste the YouTube clips with where the lecture started. So let me do that if that's okay with you. What I'm going to do is, you want to try it one more time, or is it good?
Yeah, this will be my last attempt.
Yeah, this will be my
last attempt, and then we'll play the other way. Because it is a quiet introduction. So I don't know if because we're not really hearing anything.
Well, I can also try this.
Where's it going? Do you hear it on your end?
Yeah, I've been hearing it every single time.
I've been hearing it every single time.
No, we can't on our end. So how about this? Let's put it up on YouTube.
Okay.
And here is the video, and it will show the thing. So here it is. And then we'll watch it. Okay. Always have a backup plan. Okay, there's the piece. Movement 3. There's a gift that can be shared. When your plan for tomorrow was to be, but here we are, don't know what to do.
life can be happy. You deserve the best that life can give. You deserve the best that life has to offer, and the best that it can be. Whenever you are angry, whenever you are sad, just know that you are loved. Remember,
All right, we'll get you back on, Isaac.
Cool.
All right, that's one way to do it. Coming up. All right, go ahead. You're on.
Alrighty. So, I've already kind of gone over the piece, but I wrote it during the last semester of my undergrad. Oh yeah, the one thing I didn't mention about it is that in 2020, it was supposed to get premiered at a senior recital of mine, and unfortunately, due to COVID, it got canceled. So that was one of the real big reasons towards doing this project was I never got to hear the piece. You know, you get to hear it with whatever the computer generates, but until you hear it live, it's not the same. So, the first part of the overarching theme I want to cover is recording and mixing this piece. And I wanted to start with the equipment that I used. And the picture here is an actual picture from, I believe this was the Movement 1 session. So, for those who aren't aware, this is the software that I used to make and edit everything. And so, from my perspective, this is what I was seeing as I spliced and cut everything together to make the final product. And I'll cover what some of those words mean as we go throughout this. So the equipment I used was an MXL 990, and I happen to be in my studio, so I can also show them, even though I have pictures. But it looks like this. So this is the mic I used to record. Brendan, Kristen, and also Luke, I used this one. And then I also used what's called a matched pair of pencil condensers, the SE7s. And those look like this. So this is what the SE7 looks like. There's the back of it. There's some switches. Put this away. There's pictures when I talk more specifically about each. And then I also used an audio interface called the Focusrite 18i20, which is what I'm using to do this talk now, and my computer. And I also use Pro Tools as my editing software, which is called a DAW. And I'll get into what that means as well. So starting with the MXL 990, it's a large diaphragm condenser microphone. And what that means is when you take a look at it, there's a big metal circle, and you can kind of see it in the picture here. Right here, there's this metal circle in the gray. And that metal circle is an electrolyzed metal disc. And how it works is when you speak at it, you're creating a pressure wave in the air. And that wave is moving particles which have an electrical charge. When those touch and interact with that electrolyzed metal disc, it disturbs the flow of electrons across the metal disc, and that disturbance can be translated into an electrical signal or wave in a line of cable. And that's how we can hear. And when you put that through a speaker, that's how you get and hear audio. So that's how this type of microphone works. So that's what condenser means. And a large diaphragm means that it's just a very large disc compared to the SE7s, which I'll cover in a second, which is a much smaller sized disc. I use this on the singers and the cello because the larger size of the diaphragm means it's easier to collect audio and get more of the finer details of what's being done. And then some of the issues I had with the microphone, it's a cheaper microphone, and the reason that's kind of an issue is the higher in the microphone, the better it can detect the whole range of human hearing. The range of human hearing is from 20 hertz, 20 Hz, to 20 kilohertz, 20,000 hertz. So, and I have a graph that helps to demonstrate this, but this microphone, while it's great and it does a lot of what you want it to do, it doesn't pick up the whole range of human hearing. And especially with the cello, I found that to be an issue when I was mixing everything. So when you're going to buy a microphone, they have this graph. And all the way to the left is 20 hertz, and all the way to the right is the highest end 20,000 hertz. And that's the width of the graph. And then the height is how loud it hears. And so what this tells you is how loud it detects each frequency or each pitch. And that graph looks like this. So you can see on the graph, it goes down close to 20 hertz, but does not go all the way down to it. And you can see, I'm not sure if you guys can see my mouse, but here it gets lower here, and then there's this really big spike at the end. And it means it picks up some of the higher things like it's called sibilance. So every time you say it like an S or a S, things like that, or a T kind of thing, that's where you're going to be getting those frequencies. And when you have a spike there, it takes a little bit more editing to get it to sound how the voice in this, for example, would sound in real life. So that's the issue with this microphone that I used. And then there's the detection radius for it and the high frequency bias. So the SE7 is the other pair of microphones I used. And I used these on the piano in particular. It's a matched pair, and what that means is in the manufacturing process of microphones, the weather outside that day, even in a climate-controlled environment, the air pressure, the humidity, things of that nature, can all affect the end quality of a microphone and exactly what frequencies it can detect. So what a matched pair means is that they found these two microphones in the production line through testing that were borderline, if not exactly identical, in their detection radius. And the reason that's important is when you're recording, especially something with two microphones, if you don't do that, you can get issues where it's called phase, and if the phase isn't correct, it'll reduce certain frequencies and potentially completely cancel out all sound if it's so radically different, which is why it's important. This mic, as I mentioned earlier, is what's called a small diaphragm. So this disc right here is smaller. And a good thing about these is that, especially compared to the last microphones, it has a much flatter frequency response, meaning that it detects all the frequencies much more evenly without a bias towards the high or low end of things. And here's what that detection graph would look like for these microphones. You can see that, yeah, the low end kind of starts to get quieter and quieter here, as you can tell, because it's going below 0. And there is still a bump here towards the top, but it's not as significant, and it's much more even throughout compared to the MXL large diaphragm. And that's with the detection. It can detect the entire range of human hearing, and it's a mostly flat detection radius. Moving on to the interface that I used, the 18920. It's what's known as an audio interface, and what that does is it's both a microphone preamp and an AD, or analog to digital converter. So a microphone preamp amplifies the incoming electrical signal that comes from the diaphragm of the microphone. That disturbance of the electrical flow of electrons across a microphone is incredibly minute. And so it takes something like a preamp to amplify it loud enough that we can actually hear it. It amplifies that difference. And then what an AD does is I'm using computer software to edit my audio stuff. And to get it, an electrical wave is a physical thing. So we have to convert it to binary code to be able to use it. So that's what an analog AD does. So next I want to go into how I recorded. And if you guys have any questions, or if I'm going too fast, please feel free to let me know and stop me, and I'll happily go into more detail. Are we good to keep going? Or do you want to, any other questions?
We're good. Yeah. I do want to listen real quick on the first and second movement, if that's okay, whenever you get a chance, pretty quickly. But this is good. Yeah, just keep going on the recording.
Sure. I'll go into how I recorded it, and then why don't we do movement 1?
Yes. Well, I definitely want them to hear movement 2, because I like movement 2.
We'll do that last.
We'll do that last.
The crazy one, we'll do that one last. That's the one that'll wake everybody up.
It sure
I promise
will.
you that.
It sure will.
Yeah.
So for the recording process, there's a few reasons I did it this way. One is because, and the biggest one is COVID, but 2 is when you're recording into a microphone, I heard this analogy where when you're recording with a microphone, it's a lot like the discipline of possessing a firearm. Anything you point it at is going to hear it. Whether it's, if I point it directly at this camera, anything this camera produces, it will hear, but anything behind the camera, it will also hear. So you have to be very careful about where you point microphones. And with the editing process, if there's other instruments in the same room, if you want to do the kind of editing that I'm doing, it might not work the best, because I'm using one take for one instrument in some cases and another one for a different instrument. And if I did that and I had everybody in the same room, you're going to hear a bunch of different issues where you might hear wrong notes even though they're not in the final recording, things of that nature, and it's just a mess. You want everything to be as pristine as possible. So the more you can isolate each thing that you're recording, the better. So I recorded everybody separate in my dad's church's sanctuary. So I got a little bit of that room sound, but none of everybody else's parts, so I could make sure I had the maximum amount of control over the final product. The other thing I did is I recorded everybody with a click track. And the reason I did this is because it allowed me to keep a consistency factor across everything and everyone. Everyone was recording at the exact same tempo and had the exact same time changes throughout the music. Because the time was consistent, I could cut everything together more evenly and more easily without the seams being noticeable. And then the other thing I used is the MIDI computer instruments. And the reason I did that is because I recorded everybody one at a time, but unless you were the last person, you couldn't hear what everybody else had recorded. So this way they could hear the other parts that were happening around them, and I could control how much of that they could hear to make it easier for them to perform and hear what was going on. The other thing I did was that I mic'd everything very close. And the reason I did that is by miking everything closely, I didn't get a whole lot of the room, because if I did that, some of the pitch editing that I had to do at times for other tracks, or other editing that I didn't have issues, such as poor sound or just other sound issues like distortion and things that would happen if I didn't do that. The quality of the sound would degrade. I'm trying to get as much of the thing I'm recording and as little of what I'm not recording, which is the main goal. So next I want to go into what is mixing. I've probably used this word a few times. So what music mixing is it is adjusting the volume of each track to create focus and width. So a track is one particular input, or in this case, microphone, into the recording software. So if you remember that picture I showed you, you saw those colorful rectangles. One rectangle is one track. And what I can do is then take each of those tracks, and I have a little sliding thing, and I can slide it up or down throughout time to adjust how loud or how quiet one thing that's happening is. So I can make Brenton louder, or I can make him quieter, depending on where I felt in the music the balance of that should be. Because you want to hear everything, the prominent stuff like the melody, you want that to be at the top, but you still want to hear what's happening behind him. Like if I had it being just Brenton and you can't hear all the harmonies and things behind him, you don't have a full, it would be, you want it to be like when you're hearing it live. That's the end goal. The other aspect of mixing is you're adding effects to change the sound of recordings. So, and I'll go more in depth about what these effects are. In this case, we're talking EQ, which adjusts how loud every specific frequency is, things of that nature, or more particularly reverb, which is the sound of a room. You know, when you're in a concert hall, you hear like the final note of a really great symphony, and you just hear it kind of ringing throughout the hall. And that's what reverb is. The other aspect of mixing is it's editing all of the different takes, or each time I recorded one small snippet of the music. So for example, let's say I had to record bar 101 multiple times. It's me picking one of those that I liked the best and using that. That's part of mixing as well. And there's also several methods to how you do it, and the end thing is just about equipment, really. So there's what's called analog, and that is using only physical hardware. This is a method that was done from the early 50s, late 40s, until as late, it really is. I mean, in the early 2000s is when we switched away from pure total analog recording and mixing. And how that would work is you have a microphone, you have a physical electrical signal, which would go into another device. And then that device is where you would do all, it's called a console, and I believe I have a picture of it coming up here. That is all then sent to tape. So we all remember those cassette tapes that we would put in our car radio on long drives. It's like that, but it's probably about this wide, which is probably about a foot and a half, 2 feet wide. And that's how they record everything to that before sending it to cassette tapes. The other part or other way of mixing that can be done is what's called all digital, which is what we did. All digital means it goes from the microphone to, in this case, a Focusrite analog to digital converter, and then it goes into a computer where you do everything. What's done most commonly nowadays is a hybrid approach, which is it'll still go to the analog equipment, but everything then goes to a computer still. And then an example of what's called a console, or what an actual recording studio would look like, is this. This is East West Studios in LA. I don't know if you guys can see can you guys see my mouse cursor on the screen?
Yes.
Perfect. So this right here is what's called the console. And there's a lot of fancy buttons on it, and I can tell you what some of this stuff does. The most important thing to know is that you have these things down here. These are called sliders or faders, and these slide up and down, and if you slide it up, it boosts the volume of whatever track is associated with it, and the inverse happens when you drop it down. You slide it down. And then these here are just other effects that can be put onto that sound. So when you're recording, the sound is going to go from the microphones back in here in this room, and then they go through something in the floor directly into this. And from here, they go over to here to this device here. This is their microphone preamp and their analog digital converter. And then it goes into a computer. So that's how East West Studios typically does it. And then all of these are physical effects things like a compressor which squishes all the loud stuff to make it quieter so you're not, breaking equipment is the main reason. Or if you want to make somebody sound like a robot, that's what some of this other stuff can do, which is cool. So now I want to go into how I personally mixed Forever Sleeping and some of the approaches that I took. So the first and most important thing I did, and Brendan, you can speak to this, is I had a notebook. I think I still have it around somewhere, but I was taking detailed notes of every single take that we did. Every time I hit record, I said what I liked, what could be different, or if there was a mistake. Brenton finally blew out his vocal cords in movement 2. Can't use that final take of the screaming section.
Yeah, but I didn't blow my vocal cords, but it did take over 6 hours to record your piece. Literally, you were
and we sure tried. That was definitely hyperbole. But we're taking notes of what's the good here, what's the bad, and when it happened, because I don't have to use an entire take. I can use, let's say I liked the word "the" in the very middle of that box of audio I recorded, and let's say it's only like a second long. I can use just that bit when I'm mixing, and so that's why I took notes, is to know, like, I like this part, not this part. This is what I can use from the take I just did, and what take it was. Every time you hit record, a number or an identifier is attributed to what you just recorded, so you can find it more easily and navigate through it. The next thing I did is I spliced everything together. What splicing means is it's like gluing pieces of wood together. So if we remember that picture I showed you of the session where there's all those colorful rectangles, think of that rectangle like a 2x4. What I can do is I can take a saw through it, and now I have 2 pieces of wood. And I can take a section that I cut earlier from a separate piece of wood and glue it together. That is what splicing is for audio. And then I can hide the seams with other things, like there's what's called a crossfade. And what a crossfade does is it drops the volume from wherever it is to 0 on the first half of that piece of wood, and it boosts at the exact same time up to where that volume threshold in the previous one was at the exact same time. And what that allows you to do is completely hide the seam of where you did the splicing. And it's also why the click track is so important. Because I had a click track, everything's at the same tempo, and if I didn't do that, one take could be at a slightly different tempo, and so you could hear Brendan go from saying the cat to it is black, and that kind of jumpy jerk forward, which is not something that you want. Using click track, it sounds exactly the same, even in tempo throughout. The other thing is I added effects to blend. Specifically, I used EQ. What EQ is affecting waves. So when we speak, we're creating sound, and sound is just like the ocean waves. So if you can picture the ocean, you have this wave, and it comes and it crests over the hill. So the peaks of that wave, where it's cresting, and then you have troughs down here. So with the EQ, and you have frequencies, so the more waves you have per second, the higher the pitch of that wave is going to be. Sound is the same way. The more times the waves you have per second, the higher the pitch of that's going to be. And so, for example, A is always going to be 440 if you played it on a piano, 440 hertz. So what I can do is I can edit like 441 hertz specifically, and I can make it louder or quieter. And with the reason you do that is because every single thing I've recorded is in a very small range of the human hearing. And if I don't do any of that processing, it's not going to sound realistic in the end product. So you have to use this to change how loud or quiet certain frequencies are so it sounds realistic in the final product. The next thing I use is what's called compression. So when I talk really, really loud, but everything else is really, really quiet, you're not going to be able to hear the really, really quiet because it's all being recorded at the same thing. So the same, or the amp preamp is only boosting at the same amount. What a compressor does is it makes everything above a certain loudness quieter. And then after it does that, it raises the volume of everything so that it's about where it used to be. It makes the quiets louder and the louders quiet. And then the last effect I used is what's called reverb. And I used that because I recorded everybody in the same room, but not together. But when you use a reverb plugin, you say, I want it to sound like you're in this room. And it's like you're playing the audio through a speaker in that room and recording the end result. So I've now taken them all from being in separate rooms, technically, because they're not together, to putting them in the same room. So it sounds like we're doing this live. And that really helped to blend everything together so you couldn't tell that they weren't all together or that they were performing in a certain way and alone. Now, when it comes to mixing in particular, there's two approaches. There's a classical approach and there's a pop approach. So before we get to this, Brenton, why don't you pull up movement 1 and let's take a listen to that
Let's take a listen to
so that we
that
can get an idea of
so that we can
what
get an
my
idea.
approach sounded like.
All right, folks. So here is movement 1 of Forever Sleeping. Movement 1.
Look at all these people passing by. Their faces are empty, none can go by. Look at all these people passing by. None of them can go by. Only the darkness of simple peace. Only my eyes are waiting for the noise. The stillness of the dark leaves my head, steadies my hand. Look at all these people passing by. Their faces can show joy while I want to cry. I'm starting to grow very tired, never getting to happiness. Oh my God, sorrow. Only my soul is aching my heart. I'm growing tired. 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 It's time to rest. Good night, dearest friends, good night. I am tired.
Get you back going, Isaac. People, there's a couple of the residents were talking, and they said, "Yeah, that's really Brenton singing that." I was like, "Yeah, that is me singing that. That is,
Sure
I
is.
was the guy that sang it." So
Yeah, you did a great job. I'll get more into this later about how I'm thinking about possibly doing the project again, and it's a lot of it is because I hear your voice and I'm like, I have new equipment that could do your voice so much more justice. But we'll get to that later. So hearing that gives us a really great idea of what it sounded like when we did this project together. So knowing that, here is if you were recording and mixing strictly classical music, like the Philadelphia Orchestra, for example, this is typically what the goals and the process would look like. The main goal is you want to create a realistic oral representation or sonic representation of what it would be like to listen to that live. To do that, you're going to use, I believe the idiom I heard is some new engineer asked the veteran engineer, how many microphones should I use to record an orchestra? And the person's response was, how many you got? If you have 100 microphones, you're going to use 100 microphones. In this case, I wrote down dozens because I felt like underestimating it. And the reason you're going to use that many is because you want to get the sound of everything, but you also want to have control over if somebody has a solo, you want to be able to boost the volume of just that person later on. For processing, you're going to have no effects, basically. Your reverb is the room that you're recording in, and you're going to record that while they perform. And you have to take that into effect for when and where you start your recording takes as well. When it comes to miking, you're going to use both close and distant miking. Distant miking meaning far from the ensemble or whatever you're recording, so you get what the sound of their music is in the room that is in, and close so you get more of the direct sound. So in this case, as much of Brenton's voice as possible. And then you can combine those two to get a nice balance between the sound of his voice and how his voice sounded in that room. If you use too much of the room, it's going to be harder to hear what exactly he's saying. And he has really great diction, so we don't want to do that to him. So that goes, you also want to record as much of the details, such as like, if there's a small sound of, or a small nuance of the sound of a flute, for example, you want to pick that up. You want to pick up as clearly the percussiveness of a consonant, because that makes it easier to understand as a listener. So that's classical recording. And the main thing to remember here is that you're creating as realistic a representation of what it would be like to hear that live as possible. What it would sound like to be in the room, and nothing fake, nothing artificial, all as real as possible. The other way to do this is to do what's called the pop side of things, so the more popular side of music, thinking like the Beatles or any other more Johnny Cash. These are great names I like to think of. I really like to think of the Beatles because they kind of pioneered this way of doing things, and more modern artists are doing it the exact same way, just with more technology. So the pop style of recording is the goal is to create a unique oral experience. If they had just a microphone, they could not repeat this live. It's not possible. At every single pop concert when they're doing this, there's dozens of computers in the background so that it sounds the way it does. Everything is going to be close mic'd because you want no room sound. Because you're going to put a bunch of effects on after that, and if you have room sound, you'll hear both the affected version, but also the version in the room. And in particular, when a pop artist is recording, if there's going to be like auto-tune or something that makes them sing in tune, and you also hear what's in the room at the same time, you're going to hear pitch corrected and not pitch corrected at the same time, which is not going to sound good for obvious reasons. So for that reason, they will mic everything very closely. They're also going to use lots of effects. So for example, in most pop tracks, there's going to be like 4 different reverbs on everything. So they're going to make it sound like you're in 4 different rooms. And that's just to create a specific sound. There's going to be what's called a synthesizer, which is just a fancy keyboard that sounds really like a keyboard that makes like computer sounds. An example of this would be in the 2012 Olympics, one of the opening songs was Chariots of Fire. It was also really commonly used in Baywatch when there's those guys with the swim board thing saving people from drowning, like David Hasselhoff. And you hear that opening keyboard thing. That would be an example of a synthesizer. So they're going to use a lot of these effects to create the sound that they want and shape it as much as they possibly can. And that's one of the biggest differences between pop recording and classical, is the use of effects. And it's not so much about sounding real as creating a unique experience for the listener. So let me give you an example of how I used effects. This is going to be a small snippet from Movement 2, and we're going to hope that sound suddenly works, and if not, we're just going to listen to all of Movement 2. So... I'm not sure if you guys can hear that at all. I also can't. There we go. Were you able to hear that at all?
Were you able to hear that?
Nope. We might have to play the whole thing.
I figured
Why don't we just play all of
Can you
Movement
talk
2?
Why don't we just play all of Movement 2?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. So what I was thinking was quickly, so they understand this is the craziest movement that I've ever recorded in my life. Well, so far, my short 31 years. I mean, I wanted you to talk about particularly the screaming part, where I had to scream with a belt, the gritty sound. In fact, when I did this, I was like, well, okay, Isaac, what do you want? And Isaac's very detailed, as you can tell. So it's like, okay, make it Broadway. I'm like, okay, so like Phantom of the Opera. Okay, you got it. And then let's mix in some of because I'm more picture oriented. So, all right, let's mix in the Broadway sound. You have, kind of that Broadway sound with a mix of some early rock and roll. So yeah, kind of like that. And then a fall off, and we spent like literally an hour on trying to figure out exactly what you want. Can you talk about that a little bit before we play the track? Because that's fascinating about this movement.
And I'll try not to get into too many of the kind of real nitpicky details, but um, I can. I'm going to use props. I've decided. So when you're recording, and I'll use the exact microphone that I use for Brenton. Uh, the closer you are, the more it's going to pick up of your voice. The further away, the more of the other stuff and less of your voice it's going to pick up. If you're singing really loud and you're right here, you can break things. Because the signal that you're making is that powerful. So one of the things we did when I was having Brenton scream is we moved the mic away from him, and I turned down the amount that the preamp was boosting the volume of the recording, because he's screaming into a microphone as opposed to how the last movement ended, which was this nice, soft, dolce, beautiful sound, and then into him screaming his heart out. He equivocated on this beautifully when he said it was a Broadway style. I am so mad that I didn't know about Beetlejuice on Broadway at the time, because hearing that, I was like, well, that would have been the easiest way to describe it, is just, that kind of sound. Cause it's this really, I think how I described it was really distorted, gritty, I feel like there was another verb or adage I used, but I can't remember it at this point. I might have written it down in, I think it's right there, but so I gave him all these adjectives to describe it, and then we kept the microphone away from him for the recording, so I could get it to sound like he's singing and not just like, how do I describe it? If you scream into a microphone and you overwhelm the electrical signal, it sounds like a car breaking down. Like when you blow a car engine up, it sounds a lot like that. So we're trying to avoid that so you can hear Brenton's voice and not, you know, Grandpa's Ford Model T from back in the days, but engine cylinder 4 is not really firing anymore. So that was kind of the main goal, and the main challenge of recording that movement was getting that done. And I believe the first person I ended up recording was, I believe, Aaron, who recorded the piano part. And I learned a lot from recording him, because we started with movement 2 for him, and that's why I had to pitch correct the piano, because we went in order of operations. And one of the first things he has to do after the intro to this movement that you'll hear is literally take his forearms and pound them hard on the keys of the piano. And that knocked the piano out of tune. So I learned my lesson and did the screaming last with the singers.
The mic was
Right,
was too close to the piano.
Yeah, there was a lot that I had to learn. You learn through trials and tribulations, as they say.
All right. Well, let's take a listen to that. Let's take a listen.
Sure.
And then we'll wrap it up here. So this movement was the crazy movement that I had to record. But so it is very interesting piece of music, I will say the least. And uses sound effects like Isaac talked about. So you have the screaming, "Just Let Me Die," versus the singing aspect of the song. Here we go. Don't be surprised. This is a wild piece. So I had to have you do this one. All right. Good.
Just let me down. Just let me down. The world is not kind to me. I am the only one sees it. The only one I love. Into a system that doesn't want me. Into a system that does me for money. Every twist in the road is what's up,
Together.
Together.
1,
2, 3. Wow. That's it. How you got that phone operator at the end of the recording was cool.
Yes, that
Wow.
was a lot of fun. That was actually one of the
So do you have
elements.
final? Go ahead. Sorry.
Sorry,
Go ahead. I'll let you
that was
speak
one of
here.
the elements that I actually thought of first. Was when I was thinking about this, I felt like that was a really great analogy, and I started with the idea of tackling mental health and that idea, and the rest of the piece actually kind of spiraled away to create this whole piece from that very moment at the very end of that second movement. Everything else came from that genesis point. Regarding this in particular, this kind of going back to the classical versus pop mixing, I had mentioned that I did a hybrid approach, and these are my approaches. This is how I did it differently. I mic'd everything closely, which both do, but I didn't do any of the room miking, like would be done in classical. But I did still strive for accuracy. I'm not trying to make Brenton sound like he's a robot. I want him to sound like he's Brenton, and you're hearing everything he can do without you thinking that I'm using technology to make him sound different. I did have some slight effects to get the quality of sound that I wanted, which is not humanly possible to make. So, for example, all the different reverbs that I put on him, and I think I put on a delay as well, which basically meant that every time he would sing, just after he would say it, it would sound like he's saying it again. But that's very quietly put in there. And that's the effects that I put in there. Because I'm trying to create both accuracy and a unique experience, which was the overarching goal of this whole project. And then I think the final point that I have is on future revisions. One thing I want to redo is the EQ and the effects that I put on there. as I do this line of work more often, my ear gets more developed into how I want things to sound. And I think I can, if I were to go back using some of the new equipment that I have now for this, I think I could do a better job. Um, so that's just with the going back with what I already have and redoing it that way, which I can totally do. Another thing is possibly re recording. And the biggest reason for that is, I mentioned the faults of the microphones I used. I also didn't have a lot of microphones. That is no longer the case. I have many more, and they're at different qualities. So I have the capacity to use nicer microphones to get a more detailed and accurate representation of what's in front of them, as well as a more informed perspective on how to do it. And I think I could get an overall better recording out of it. Mainly, the main thing I think of with this is I think I could do a better job recording the cello. That was one of the things where I was happy with how he performed. I wasn't happy with the end result, and that solely lied on me. So I'd like to fix that. I have more experience now that, and that's the main things I want to do with revisions is go back and try those things again. So hopefully I can get to that soon. And the last thing I want to leave you with is, and how serendipitous that we finish with movement 2. This is what I believe this is movement 2 looked like at the end. Maybe this is movement 3. And you can see this is what the session looked like. So you can see here an example of the splices. You see a bunch of these white lines in between, which are the edit points and everything. But yeah, that's what the session looked like. That's how the project worked, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
All right, Isaac Duquette, everyone. Let's give him a hand. Woo! All right. Wow, very detailed. So I want to open up first for the resident. I have a couple. I know it's late. Sorry, folks. But does anybody have a question or a comment for Mr. Isaac Duquette about the recording? And by the way, you're on video. There you are. So they're watching on the TV. So anything that is mentioned tonight's lecture? Does anybody want to say anything? Just raise your hand. And yes.
I really just want to say how much I enjoyed it and how thrilling it was for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Awesome. Anybody else? Do you want to have anything to say, Joe? Anything? You enjoyed it?
Very much.
Very good. So two, they're enjoying it.
I enjoyed it.
Thank you. Okay, they all enjoyed it. Wonderful. So I have a question, and it regards to. So I'm known as the tech guy here. So I fix like their computers and things like laptops and stuff. And my technology level is this high, and Isaac's is that high. So in regards to recording aspects, so I sort of got a lot of what you said, but for someone that might not understand a lot of the recording aspect, what is something that they could start? Anybody who wants to get into that field, perhaps, and learn a little bit about maybe perhaps running sound in the church, running sound here at Friends Home. We have a big sound system here. Talk to me about that in a simpler term. That might be someone that might not get the full aspects of the splice and the different microphones.
So if it's for Friends Home, it depends if it's for live sound or for sound recording. There's a lot of similar infrastructure, but when it comes to the final method for delivery, that can kind of change things. The simple things that you need microphones to record the sound. So if it's for like a video conference, they need to be able to hear you. You need cables to take that sound from the microphone to the next thing, which is microphone preamps to amplify the sound. And then from there, you'll typically send it to some type of interface that will allow you to go from that to speakers or to a computer.
Very good. Boy, this is an interesting piece. I do want to talk about the music behind the piece. We didn't get much to that tonight, which is okay. So about the piece, suicide prevention, a really hot topic that really mental health and getting the help you need so you don't go through the suicide, because really that second movement really goes through the wanting to do it, and really it leads to like, no, that's not the right answer. There is hope. And even people who attempt to or even think that is the wrong thing to do. So what, for the average listener that hears a piece like that, who might be struggling with mental health or depression or suicidal thoughts, what's the thought? What do you want the listener to be taken away by that piece of music?
I remember when I was really going through everything at that time in my life, and they're always like, you're not alone. It's okay to be sad, things like that. You're not alone in this feeling. And I never really felt personally like that helped. And so one of my big goals with this piece is to explain it better. It's not just that you're not alone, it's that I know how this feels. You're not alone and you're sick. There's nothing wrong with you. You're just sick. We've all had the flu, things of that. And mental illness is no different. You're sick, you need to see a doctor, and they can help make you better, but you have to trust them too. And that was one of the things I wanted to really, and I felt like I really tackled it well, because of just, you see it kind of spiral and get worse and worse, and that's what happens with every single illness too. The other thing is I wanted to challenge, I'm sure many of us know the name Sigmund Freud, and I learned this after I wrote this piece, and thankfully I felt like I challenged this notion, because he's this kind of prolific figure in mental awareness and psychology. And his approach to, he called it melancholia, which is just this, there's being sad and upset about something, and then there's being so sad that it consumes you entirely. He called it selfish, and he also said that, the reason this person is so, vehemently against themselves and thinking all these awful things about themselves is because they're right. And I really wanted to tackle that because, for example, a depressed person is thinking like, I'm not worthy. I am a burden to everyone around me, and life would be better without me. And for Freud to say that that person is accurate, well, I'm not a burden. I wasn't then, and I try not to be now. I think I'm moderately successful at that. So I wanted to challenge that. Just because you're feeling this way doesn't mean that you're worth less than anybody else. So that was kind of the biggest goal I wanted to tackle with that.
Wow, what a powerful story. Yeah, so folks, if you are listening, there is hope. And there is people that love you, and you are loved, and you are cared for, no matter what circumstance in life you are, because we all...
You have to like yourself.
You have to like yourself. Amen. Right? You have to like yourself and know that you are loved, because everybody here at Friends Home and everybody in the world has a place in the world. So that's great. Powerful. Last question. So it's kind of like an invitation again. So we've had you for 2 lectures. You're literally, I don't know, like an hour, a little less than that from Friends Home. Maybe one day, would you be interested in performing? Just come here live at Friends Home, and we can have a concert of Isaac Duquette's music. Would you be interested? Would you like to hear him at a concert live? Let's give it a hand. Yeah. So we'll talk about those details because Isaac's very busy. So Yeah, we'll definitely get you live because I think hearing the concert would be really good. Well, folks, I know it's late, and I really appreciate this, and I thank you for everybody that's listening. And folks, thank you for listening. We will have this again in the month of April, and I really am appreciative of Isaac Duquette and his willingness to present really the mental health aspect of his piece Forever Sleeping, which I had the privilege of recording, singing, and also the recording aspect, a really complex way. And we are grateful to you, my friend Isaac Duquette. So let's give him one more hand.
Thank you so much.
And thank you, and God bless you all, and have a wonderful day. Go ahead and end the recording. And I'd like to get a picture with everybody real quick. So let's turn the lights on. So just stay where you are. And what we'll do is, I know the lights are on, but and I know it's late,